Welcome to Blackstone Intelligence. I'm Jake Morphonios. Give me an okay out there if you can hear the audio all right. Good to see everyone joining in. Lawyer for the People. Evening, sir. Katie Cat. Appreciate you guys jumping in to help moderate. All right. I think everything's good with the sound. Okay, good. Thanks. Very good. It's 10:38 as of right now. A little late getting started. Today was my birthday. Guess it still is. 50 years old today. 50 years old. I don't like it. But anyway, I could take the day off from live streaming. Yeah, the lighting is terrible right now. I'll see if I can fix that in a few minutes. In fact, give me 1 second here. Let me switch something. Bear with me one moment. Let me see if I can. Well, let me see if this. That actually made it worse, I think. Sorry about that. Oh, you know what it is? Let me slip on a white shirt. I'll bet that'll change the white balance. As crazy as that sounds, I think it's the white balance is off on this. That may make me a little less washed out. How about that? I'm doing a striptease for you on my birthday. The big 5-0. Yeah, I'm sure I qualify for all kinds of old people stuff now. But I could have taken the day off, but I couldn't. I woke up this morning knowing that I had to do at least a short live stream. I'm hoping to keep it to around 30-ish minutes. I'll be a little candid. All right, I've been looking at horrible stuff since I was in my 20s. Very graphic footage. I don't even remember back in the very early days of the internet. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was, where there was minimal video sharing. There was no such thing as YouTube or anything like that. The bandwidth to share video was, it was a very different thing back then, late 90s, early 2000s. It's back when you had like AOL, America Online, and you had to pay sometimes for, the number of hours that you used the internet. You didn't have things like it is today. So getting video was a little bit hard to do early on in those early days. But I've had some sites that I would go to and would watch footage of things going on in the Middle East. death, carnage, horrible stuff. One of the things I saw early on that was truly awful was do you guys remember, if you're old enough, I guess, the the decapitation of the Jewish reporter Daniel Pearl. Daniel Pearl was over in the Middle East reporting on things. He was Jewish. He was taken captive, and they cut his head off in I think it was Al Qaeda. Cut his head off, and they did it on camera, and it was gruesome. I mean, it was as dirty as you could get. You know, you got the guys. In fact, if you remember the very first Iron Man movie, the Marvel movie Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, there's this scene in it where his convoy has been hit and he's unconscious, and when he comes to, he's on his knees with some black masked men standing behind him, terrorists, and they're recording a video. That was actually a reenactment of what they did to Daniel Pearl. And they leaned him forward, pulled his hair back, and right there just started sawing, big Bowie knife, gurgling, bubbles coming out of the gaping part of his. It was horrible. Screaming too. He didn't go quietly. It was bad. And you could see stuff like that back then, early on, if you knew where to look. But there was a lot of stuff like that I saw, and it was gruesome, and it was hard to watch. And over the decades, I have never shied away from being exposed to that kind of content. It never gets easy to watch. There is a certain amount of desensitization to it. But it really impacted me in a way. It took the heroism and the excitement of war out of it. And you could see with Iraq war footage that was coming out, different things coming out, you could see, whoa, this is not like how it is in the movies. It's awful. Horrible. My point is, I've watched so many videos, hundreds upon hundreds of similar videos over the years. But I saw one last night. It was no more bloody. In fact, it was far less bloody than a lot of the ones that I've seen. But it hit me hard last night. It was awful. And I think there was the emotional component to me that hit me way harder than what was actually being depicted in the video. And the video is actually on my Telegram channel. And I posted a link to it on my Twitter feed. So if you go to either blackstoneintel or at Morphonios on Twitter, I've got a link to my Telegram channel there with the particular post. What it shows are a couple children, maybe 6 years old, 7 years old, a couple little girls on the floor of a hospital because there's no beds. Maybe they're not even that old. Could be 4 or 5 years old. And it's just awful because they're not dead. I've seen so many pictures of dead children from the past Israeli operations that I've covered. Nothing new. But this one, the little girls were still alive. And you could tell that they were delirious with pain. Shredded down one leg. You can see the the bones of the leg sticking out through the flesh. And they're barely moaning. They're alive. Beautiful little girls, blown up. And that was it like, part of it is because I've got my little girls. And so it hits me hard when I see something that can be so personal. Because I know that if I was, just by fate, by chance, had I been born over in Gaza or, other parts of the Palestinian territories, and I was raising my family there, that could very well be me. It could very well be my daughters. And with the number over 3,000 children killed in the last 3 weeks by Israel, very good chance. Also, very good chance that my children would have lost their father by now, because I'm not going to sit around and do nothing. Probably would have gotten myself, killed. But I went to sleep last night with that on my mind. In fact, it's one of the few times as the video was going that I took my mouse and I was trying to turn it off, and I actually had accidentally opened it on 2 windows and I couldn't find the second window to shut down. And so I finally just muted my whole system and shut it down, locked my computer and left, because it was just too much. It was too much. And I went to bed. And I woke up this morning, probably around 10 a.m., because I went to bed late. I woke up this morning around 10 a.m. with my wife shaking me, trying to wake me up. My room, our bedroom, is up on the 2nd floor. She was downstairs in the kitchen, cooking or doing something, and it's a good distance away from the bedroom. Downstairs, and have to go through several rooms to get to the kitchen. And she heard me screaming in my sleep. And at the top of my lungs, screaming in my sleep. And apparently I was experiencing sleep paralysis. I couldn't move, which I've been diagnosed with narcolepsy. I have sleep paralysis from time to time. It's where you wake up, but your limbs don't move. You can't move your body. You barely move your mouth sometimes. But anyway, she woke me up, and it took a long time. I think she sat with me close to 45 minutes before I really gained consciousness and understood what was going on. I thought I was, because I couldn't move my limbs, and because my body was in a lot of pain from apparently whatever position I had gotten my neck into as I kind of thrashed around having these nightmares this morning. I got my neck stuck bad, and I've been taking ibuprofen all day. But anyway, it hurt really bad, and so I was kind of confused when I woke up. I kept asking her what happened. Was I in the hospital? Because it didn't make sense. I kept dreaming of this destruction, of this war, of what was happening. And in my dreams, it was my children that had been killed. And so I woke up, and she kept telling me, "No, Jake, you're at home. You're okay. You're not in the hospital." But I thought that was it. I thought that I was over there, and that my home had been hit, and that maybe I had lost control of my body, that I was so damaged that I couldn't move, and I was paralyzed, and I wasn't processing right. And it's been a tough day, because that really stuck with me all day long. And I've tried to be chipper, but I'll tell you the truth. I've had some of my kids call today, and I haven't taken the calls. I just couldn't. I I I just texted back, said, I'll call you tomorrow. Thank you for calling. Love you, but let me call you tomorrow. Because I knew that this would come out, that I would seem weird on the phone. I did have a nice time though. My wife and I took the three little children who we still have at home. We've raised 10 children together over the years. Got my little 3-year-old twins, and I've got a 12-year-old son. Uh, and then my adult daughter, one of my adult daughters, and her husband joined us, and we all went to a corn maze, and that was fun. Little petting zoo. We took a hay ride around the acreage, and get pulled behind a tractor, and then did the corn maze, and then came home and had a little party, and everybody left, and then I could get, I got into here because this has been on my mind. I wanted to talk about this today. And it just, yeah, part of it is, I think, empathy. Part of it is I feel so deeply for the people and what they're going through. Now, I would feel, I have so much more experience with the side of the Palestinians, because they're subjected to just an amazingly disproportionate amount of violence compared to what Israelis go through. But I empathize with the Israelis as well. But the Palestinians, what's going on with them? And so people want to know what's going on. And oddly enough, strange coincidence. So today's my birthday. I was born October 30th, 1973, down in Miami, Florida. My ancestors, both sides of my family, were from here in North Carolina, but we, by chance, I was born in Miami, lived down there for a handful of years as a kid, moved up here. And I was, most of my friends down in Miami were Jews. I was always going to bar mitzvahs and Passovers, and my grandmother, being a politician down there, was always getting invited by the lawyers and a lot of the other politicians to Jewish events. So I had no problem growing up, very much exposed to it. But the month I was born, October 1973, exactly 50 years ago, it was a significant month in this long history of the Israelis and Palestinians. 3 weeks before I was born, on October 6th, a coalition of Arab forces launched an operation. They were trying to take back lands that they had lost to Israel 6 years earlier in 1967. And this happens, this conflict, this war happens the month I was born. And so I feel kind of tied to it in a weird way. Here I am 50 years later, October, 50 years later, another huge Arab-Israeli conflict event going on. The one in 73, they call it different names because the attack started on the Jewish holiday called Yom Kippur. The Jews call it the Yom Kippur War, but it also coincided with Islam's sacred month of fasting, so a lot of Muslims refer to it as the Ramadan War. And then other people, kind of more secular historians, either call it the Arab-Israeli War of October 1973, or they just simply call it the Fourth Arab-Israeli War. And I want to talk for just a couple minutes tonight about, as I've been doing these videos lately, I'll go in and I'll read comments. And for the new people that are hearing this for the first time, some of this stuff, they often ask the same kinds of questions. And it's basically, what led up to this? Why? What's the big deal? And what they need to understand is that this is nothing new. This is just the latest chapter in an ongoing story that has been going on for a long time. It's not happening in a vacuum. The media wants to portray this as everything is fine, and then, Palestinians have some grievances, and the Jews have some grievances, but just all of a sudden, for no reason, Hamas goes and carries out this terrible terrorist attack out of the blue, and so now Israel is fighting for its life. Like, Netanyahu saying that this is the second Jewish war for independence. Oh my gosh. But anyway, let's talk about this for a couple minutes. For over 1,000, yeah, I just saw over in the chat, I'm not watching closely, but Just Observer said, let's go for likes. Definitely, if you're watching, hit the like button, please. I'm going to give you a little bit of history real quick. For over 1,000 years, Muslims have been the majority, the overwhelming majority, the demographics in the lands of Palestine. This is widely accepted fact by historians, including among Jewish scholars. Let me put up a chart here as we go through. There we go. Now I understand you may not be able to read this; it may be too small. So I'm gonna share some stats, but I wanted you to be able to see it as I talk. So, for example, if you take a look here, back in the 1500s, there were approximately 145,000 Muslims living in the area called Palestine. 145,000 Muslims. They were mostly Arabs, of course. And there were only 5,000 Jews in Palestine. People have this misunderstanding that because of the Bible, Jews have been, this huge population there in the Holy Land ever since. And that's simply not true. Jews were driven out by the Romans. They were driven out by the Babylonians. They were driven out by the Romans. And they eventually settled in a lot of the countries they were taken to. They settled in Iraq, what is modern day Iraq. They settled in Persia. They settled in Europe. They traveled to Europe, and that's one of the reasons there's so many Jews in Europe. But if you look at the chart here, by 1890, there were 432,000 Muslims in Palestine. There were 57,000 Christians. Most of them were Arab Christians. There were only 43,000 Jews. That is a significant difference. Now, around 1890, roughly, this is the time when the wealthy and the powerful Rothschild family, Jewish family, bankers, very much entrenched in the centers of power in London and major cities in Europe, they begin trying to buy up land in Palestine and trying to encourage European Jews to migrate over to Palestine. The plan to do this was staunchly opposed by the Orthodox Jews who were living mostly in Europe. Relatively few Jews were into this idea. They did not move. Religiously speaking, the Orthodox Jews, you can find photos online, there's tons of them. To this day, back then, in the early 1900s, up through today, a lot of the Orthodox Jews, based on their religious faith, they do not believe that they are supposed to go in and reestablish a state for the Jewish people until the Messiah himself returns and leads them. Because they had been wicked, according to the scriptures, they were driven out, they lost the lands, And it is a sign of lack of belief or lack of faith in their God, in Yahweh, to presume that they can go back and establish their own state without obeying or following or waiting upon the prophecies that the Messiah will lead them back and establish it. Just look up videos of the Jews in New York City, the Orthodox Jews in New York City, that give speeches about this all the time. Yeah, Rabbi David Weiss is one of them. But anyway, you've got the Rothschilds, these various powerful people in the early Zionist movement who were looking to establish an outpost in the Middle East. They wanted to expand their financial empires. These guys were the European robber barons like we had over in the States with Carnegie and Rockefeller and later on J.P. Morgan. These were the big guys over there, and they're trying to make money, and they need to get into Palestine because that is a central place. You couldn't make a whole lot of money there at the time, but they wanted to get in there. So you end up with the Balfour Declaration and things like that we can talk about some other time. But they're trying to expand their financial empires, and they're using Zionism, the Zionist movement, to do it. Most of these people were atheists, these Zionists. They weren't doing it because because of religious reasons. They're just using religion as a way of manipulating the people. So after World War I and the fall of the Ottoman Empire was, it was huge. You didn't have all these individual states like you have now. You didn't have Syria and Iraq. You didn't have Lebanon. You didn't have these. You didn't have a country called Palestine because that was kind of the old world order. These individual nation states really started popping up as the Allies after World War I started chopping up what was, the lands of the Ottoman Empire, which had been one big caliphate, primarily led by the Turks. And they chop it up and they create their own little territories and say, okay, France, you get Syria. The British are going to get Palestine, so on and so forth. But it was after World War I and the fall of the Ottoman Empire that the British government goes in and they take control of the area known as Palestine. Jewish terrorist organizations, including Haganah and Irgun, they waged campaigns of bloody terrorism against the British to try and force the British out so they could take the lands for themselves. Let me show you this as well. Just so for those who are new to this and think that I'm being a little hyperbolic here, let me read to you what about these early terrorist organizations. This is how Israel was born. This is from Haaretz, the oldest, longest-running newspaper in Israel. Assassinations, terror attacks, and even castration, the hidden actions of Israel's pre-state militia. This month marks the 100th anniversary of the formation of the forerunner of the Israeli army. While the Haganah boasts of its heroic acts and looks down on similar right-wing groups, its history also includes dark operations it would prefer not to mention. Okay, so when I call Haganah terrorists, that's Israel's longest-running newspaper, referring to them as terrorists. Okay, I mentioned Irgun, which kind of took over after Haganah. Here's what Encyclopedia Britannica says about the Irgun. Irgun, the Hebrew National Military Organization, a Jewish right-wing underground movement in Palestine founded in 1931, at first supported by many non-socialist Zionist parties in opposition to the Haganah. It became, in 1936, an instrument of the revisionist party, an extreme national group that had seceded from the World Zionist Organization and whose policies called for the use of force, if necessary, to establish a Jewish state on both sides of the Jordan River. Irgun committed acts of terrorism and assassination against the British, whom it regarded as illegal occupiers, and it was also violently anti-Arab. Irgun participated in the organization of illegal immigration into Palestine after the publication of the British White Paper on Palestine, which severely limited immigration. Irgun's violent activities led to execution of many of its members by the British. In retaliation, Irgun executed British army hostages. Okay, think about this. This is the Encyclopedia Britannica. It doesn't get any more vanilla than this. This is not coming from some anti-Israel organization. This is not coming from, some anti-Semitic source. This is the Encyclopedia Britannica, referring to Irgun as a terrorist movement. It mentions the extreme national group. It was an instrument of the revisionist party, an extreme national group that had pulled away from the World Zionist Organization. You know who one of the heads of that new revisionist party was? Benjamin Netanyahu's father was the head of it. Netanyahu's father was a freaking terrorist. Or at least he was all gussied up and looking nice, but he was a terrorist. Very anti-Arab, very racist organization. And these groups, Haganah, later Irgun, they were the predecessors of the Israeli military. When Israel first declared independence, these were their fighters. So you hear all the time, all this talk about, Hamas, they're terrorists. It's funny how when Israel was the party that didn't have the power, their organizations were all known for terrorism. They blew up the freaking King David Hotel to kill a bunch of British soldiers, killed Americans too. But anyway, let me bring this census stat back up. I just really think it's the pot calling the kettle black when the Zionists talk about Hamas, calling them terrorists, when that's what they were. That's how Israel started. Israel was created through illegal immigration and terrorism. Anyway, so as these immigrants are moving in, as the Rothschild programs are and other Zionist programs are really pushing to try and get as many Jews to move into Palestine as possible, you get these Zionists moving in. They're trying to buy the lands from the Arab natives, but the landowners didn't want to sell their properties. Their families had been on these lands for centuries. The British government kept extensive census records. In 1914, look, you can see here, 1914, the Jewish population had increased to 94,000. But look, just 8 years later, it dropped to 84,000 in 1922. They couldn't sustain it. They could not sustain the population increase. But it was in the late 1920s, early 1930s that Jewish immigration really began to pick up. Illegal immigration. Immigration contrary to what was allowed by the political entity that controlled it, which was the Brits. By 1931, there were 175,000 Jews, but the Arab population had gone up to 760,000 Muslims. By 1947, you've got 630,000 Jews, but you've got 1.2 million Muslims. So despite this illegal Jewish migration increasing rapidly, there's still twice as many Muslims as Jews, the year before the Jews that were there declared independence, saying, you know what, I know that there's less than half of us, but we claim this land for us. And also, according to these British census records, as late as 1948, the year that Jews declared independence, the Jews who lived in the lands of Palestine only had legal ownership of 5% of the territory, because the Arabs wouldn't sell the land to them. They didn't want to. People should not have to sell their property if they don't want to. But since it's clear that the European Jews flooding into Palestine were not going to be able to get the locals to sell the land, the Jews decided they were going to take control of it by force. And that's when they really, when Irgun really increased its terrorism against the British, trying to drive them out so that they could turn around and go after the Arabs without the British there, keeping them somewhat in line. So seeing that this was not sustainable, the British decide, you know what, we got to back out of this. This is not in our interests. So the United Nations recommends a solution. The United Nations recommended a two-state system where what they would do is split the lands of Palestine, with the Arab population, the Arab Palestinians, having the clear majority of the land, while letting the areas where the Jews were squatting, because remember, they didn't own the land, but they were on it, letting the Jews have the minority portion that they were occupying. Now, that sounds great. The Jews were like, yeah, okay, fine, give us that. Because they knew they were going to go after more, but still, international backing, support for us getting some of it? Yeah. Now, wait a second, though. The land doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the Arab Palestinians. So naturally, the Arab Palestinians said, absolutely not. We will not consent to this. It was a non-starter. You can't have one party say, listen, I propose this, where I'm going to take half your land, and if the other party says, no, I'm not going to give you half my land, you don't have the right to say, well, I'm just going to take it anyway. But that's what the Jews did. They declared independence in 1948. They don't just want, they didn't then and they do not now only want the land that they're on. They want all of the lands of Palestine, and they want lands beyond Palestine. Let me show you something else here. Let me find where I put this thing I want to show you here. Is this it? Yeah. All right. It's you don't have to be able to read the whole thing, but this is from Wikipedia. It's just a little bit of information on Greater Israel. The only reason that I'm using Wikipedia is just to emphasize that this is kind of, that when you hear people talking about Greater Israel, this is not some conspiracy theory. It's just commonly accepted information. Greater Israel is the idea. Let me expand this. Greater Israel is the idea that the Jews have, that they want not just Palestine. They want a lot more land. They want to take parts of Egypt. They want to take, of course, everything in Palestine. But they also want to take huge sections of Jordan. They want to take parts of Lebanon. They want to take the majority of Syria. They even want to go over and take parts of Iraq. Okay. Now, this is one chart. There's another chart that I posted on Twitter. This is another Theodore Herzl, who was the founder of Zionism. He said that Greater Israel is the area of the Jewish state which stretches from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates. This territory here, outlined in red, takes all of the Sinai Peninsula, takes the coastline of Egypt, it takes all of Lebanon, it takes all of Jordan, it takes half of Iraq, it takes a huge swath out of Saudi Arabia, it takes most of Syria, all the way up into southern Turkey. This is Greater Israel. This is what Israel wants. One of the main proponents of Greater Israel was Benjamin Netanyahu's father. Benjamin Netanyahu is carrying out the dreams of his own dad that his dad worked for throughout his life as the leader of one of the largest and also one of the most extreme Zionist organizations. So when you look at current events going on today and you see Israel saying, we're fighting Hamas, and yet they're over in the West Bank where Hamas is not in control, and they're bombing the West Bank. Back in December of 2022, Netanyahu said, we're going to annex all of the West Bank. We're going to take it. They're over in Gaza. They're not fighting Hamas. I mean, if they happen to kill some Hamas militants while they're over there, fine. But that's not the goal. The goal is to absolutely flatten the entire top half of the Gaza Strip, reduce it to rubble, get rid of all of the homes, get rid of the infrastructure, make it impossible, literally impossible, for the people, the Palestinians, to live there. Force them down. Here, let me bring up Google Earth here so you can see. Okay. All right. And one thing that's ironic about Israel going after the Gaza Strip, even in the Bible, this is one area that Israel, in all of its history, never conquered. The Philistines were here. You've heard of Goliath, the Philistines. Israel could never, not under David, Solomon, all the future kings, they never conquered Philistia, which is what the region is named after. Philistine, Palestine, that's where the word comes from. But anyway, the goal here is to cut the top half of Gaza off, reduce it to rubble. The reason that they're ordering over and over and over, trying to get the civilians to go down into the south, is so that they can just demolish everything up here so it's uninhabitable. They're saying, oh yeah, move into the south and you'll be safe there. That's bullcrap. Down here, the only crossing is at Rafah. The only way out of the Gaza Strip into Egypt is right here in Rafah. The Rafah crossing. The goal is to force, you've got roughly 2 million, little over 2 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. They have forced about 1 million of them, over 1 million, out of the top down into the south. Stage 2 is going to be to open Rafah crossing, which the Egyptians right now are keeping closed because they don't, they're one of the reasons they don't want the refugees flooding in, because they've already got so many Palestinian refugees in Egypt. But Israel will open this up and bomb the southern half and force them to leave and flee as refugees into Egypt. And then Israel will claim the entire territory for itself. I don't have it at my fingertips. Let me look here and see. I'm going to look at my Twitter feed. There was a letter, WikiLeaks. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Let me go back over here. So WikiLeaks put something out today. Verified document from Israeli Military of Intelligence on October 13th. This is a week after the Hamas attacks. Suggests forced displacement of Gaza civilians to Egypt would, quote, yield positive and long-term strategic results. So this is a leaked document that shows that the goal of Israel is not trying to get rid of Hamas for some self-defense. It's to push everybody down south and then push them even further into Egypt so that they can have the whole Gaza Strip. That's what it's about. It's land theft. It's the same thing they've been after from the beginning. It's land theft. It's trying to expand their borders. But the average American, the average whoever, doesn't know this because it's a very complicated history. There's a lot that has gone on there. And unfortunately, the Israelis, the Zionists, are master manipulators of information because they have so much influence in the media and over politicians. And so you don't hear ever about what precipitated an action by Palestinian resistance or by a Palestinian militant or terrorist action. You don't hear what provoked it. You only hear the part of Israel is only defending itself. It's a damned lie, and everyone keeps falling for it, and I want all of you out there to learn and understand this so you can push back and say, no. Israel is not defending itself. Israel has been the offensive party going back to their early days when the entire world acknowledged that they were engaged in terrorism. They used terrorism to drive the British out. They used terrorism to steal the lands from the Palestinians to begin with. And they have used state terrorism ever since to suppress the population, to keep them in abject poverty, and to ethnically cleanse the lands in degrees over time so that they can take more and more land. Israel's not just bombing Gaza, they're bombing Syria. They, in 1982, no. Yeah, it was 1982, they killed 20,000 people. Most of them were Palestinian refugees, or a lot of them were, in southern Lebanon. So anyway, you've got 1948, when the Zionists arbitrarily declared ownership of these lands in Palestine that nobody gave to them, that they just took, the same lands that they had been trying to purchase, they said, screw that, they're not going to sell it to us, so we'll just steal it. And because they had much more powerful weapons, they had tanks and things that these Palestinian peasants didn't have. So they take it. They mobilize their terror network. They use their new state military, which was essentially just basically if ISIS overthrew Syria and then said, we now have a military and it's all ISIS fighters, well, you could say, sure, it's a state military, but if it's the same people that were committing the acts of terrorism before they got their self-declared statehood, they're still terrorists. I don't care what anyone says. The members of the Israeli military, they are engaged in terrorism. But anyway, when the Zionists do this, when they go and gobble up these lands and drive the Palestinians off, The surrounding Arab nations tried to stop them, but Israel succeeded in a partial ethnic cleansing of Palestine. They slaughtered massive numbers of Palestinian civilians. They sent close to 1 million of them fleeing out of Palestine, where they live. Them and their children and their children's children are living in refugee camps in Egypt. They live in refugee camps in Jordan and Lebanon and Syria. Now, fortunately for the Palestinians, even though Israel took control of 500 of their towns and villages in that initial push to try and take all the land, fortunately, the Arab coalition stopped Israel from taking it all. Now, this 1948-49 conflict, that's known as the First Arab-Israeli War. The Second Arab-Israeli War is also known as the Suez Crisis of 1956. The Arabs call it the tripartite aggression. The Jews call it the Sinai War. Basically, what was going on was that the European colonial powers took control of the Suez Canal because that's what they were using for shipments of Middle Eastern oil that the Europeans were exploiting for their own profit at the expense of the local people who were languishing in poverty and lack of education, while the oil is flowing out of their land and the profits are not coming to them. They're going to these foreign Rothschild, Rockefeller oil corporations. It was exploiting it for their own profit. Well, what Egypt did was they acted to nationalize the Suez Canal Company that was owned primarily by British and French shareholders. It's kind of what Mohammed Mossadegh did in Iran when he booted out the Anglo-American oil company, the predecessor of what today is called BP, British Petroleum. They were exploiting the oil of Iran. Mohammed Mossadegh was elected. He kicked them out. He nationalized the oil and then used the profits from it to pour into social programs to raise people up. He poured it into education so that they could become literate. And so to get rid of Mossadegh, the CIA went in 1953, Operation Ajax, and they knocked him out. And they installed the Shah of Iran, who introduced this brutal, repressive regime, which eventually led to the 1979 revolution that put the Ayatollahs in power, and that government kind of continues to this day. And that's the real reason why America keeps trying to go to war with Iran. Iran took their oil back from us. Can you believe the audacity of the Iranians? The oil that we were taking, they took it back from us? We can't let that stand. We got to get back into Iran. So anyway, Egypt did basically that. They nationalized the Suez Canal Company. So what the colonial powers did was they backed a military operation by Israel. They didn't want to go in and do the dirty work themselves. Now, it's kind of like one mafia family scratching the back of another. They may not be friends all the time, but if there's things they can do of mutual benefit, they'll do it. Israel wanted land. They want this greater Israel. So yeah, they agreed to go in October, 1956, Israel invaded the Gaza Strip and went down into the Sinai Peninsula, which is that kind of triangle-shaped part between Greater Egypt and Palestine. So Israel goes in, invades the Gaza Strip, invades the Sinai. Britain and France eventually sent in their own troops to help the Israelis. Back then, U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower and the premier of the Soviet Union, they both were telling Britain and France, don't do this. Don't invade. Don't do this. And it was a big mess. By the time it was over, the Suez Canal system had been just so badly damaged, it was basically useless. It was a debacle for the colonial powers. Really backfired. So historians consider this 1956 war, the second Arab-Israeli war, as the mark, historically speaking, this marks the end of Great Britain's role as one of the world's major powers. That's not me saying that. That is scholarly consensus among historians. When you have to find a marker at which we can say, all right, the once mighty British Empire, which used to be what the United States is today, their major power ended following the 1956 war. That's the marker, which should be a warning to the United States. We are following down that same path by backing Israel, by going along with this, by stealing land, by trying to do the bidding of our war industry, our oil industry. We're just setting ourselves up for a huge collapse. It's going to happen. History repeats itself. It's going to happen. Now, the third Arab-Israeli war, let me speed through this. The third Arab-Israeli war you may have heard of more. This is called the Six-Day War. It took place in June 1967. You've got Palestinian resistance groups. They've been battling the Israeli military off and on for some time. It really starts to get worse in 1966. And this results in brutal Israeli reprisals against the civilian population. In leading up to June 67, Soviet intelligence reports demonstrated that Israel was massing and preparing for a major military operation against Syria. Egypt knows, dang it, they're going to come after us too, probably. So fearing this impending Israeli war to grab more lands, to add to its greater Israel project, you've got Israel's neighbors. They start moving their military assets around in preparation. What Israel does, again, being the masters of propaganda, these defensive movements by Egypt and Syria, Israel says, oh, look, they're preparing to go to war and attack us, so we should preempt that. And they launched their own pre-planned war. Israel sucker punched Egypt, knocked out Egypt's entire air force before they could even get a single plane off the ground. They attacked Syria's air force. Israel moved into the Gaza Strip and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula to occupy it. Israel grabbed Syria's Golan Heights. They went after the Jordanian-controlled East Jerusalem and West Bank. And when I was in Israel, Palestine, you can still see holes all over the place in buildings and gates and doors from the fighting. The marks are still there. Jordan held on to most of the land, but overall, the Six-Day War was an unmitigated, humiliating disaster for the Arab nations. And I don't know if anyone has mentioned it in the chat, but probably by now someone's said something about the USS Liberty. I've done a lot of reporting on the USS Liberty, so I won't really go into that now, other than to say Israel attacked a spy vessel that was part of the U.S. Navy that was off the coast of Egypt. Israel attacked it knowing full well, because we have the audio, some of the audio from the pilots talking back to ground control saying, it's waving a U.S. flag. They're flying a U.S. flag, and they're saying, Israel is saying, sink it, attack. And so Israel attacked the USS Liberty. They killed over 100 U.S. sailors. Those sailors, to this day, those that are still alive, they hate Israel with a passion. And they are furious that our own government has taken the side of Israel. It was an act of war. Israel wanted to bring the United States of America into the war. They wanted the USA in there fighting against Egypt. And so what Israel did was it tried to sink the Liberty take out its communications, sink the Liberty completely so that the United States would think that it was Egypt that attacked the USS Liberty. Israel was supposed to be allies with the USA. It wouldn't make any sense for Israel to attack the Liberty. It was a false flag. It was a false flag attack. The United States ordered a nuclear strike on Cairo. They were 2 minutes away from the capital of Egypt when Johnson called this strike off. We almost attacked Cairo with a nuclear bomb. Just miles away were Soviet naval vessels. The Soviet Union would have responded to that with their own nukes. It would have been a nuclear war. And Israel was willing to put the entire world at risk to do that for its own benefit. Israel, these politicians that talk about Israel as our, best friend, our greatest ally, really? Since when does an ally slaughter 130 or whatever it was sailors, try and sink it to pull you into a war on their behalf? That's right. Never forget. I've spoken with numerous men who had been aboard the Liberty. I can tell you from firsthand conversations, they know Israel attacked them. They know that Israel knows what they were doing. But anyway, like I said, I don't want to get too off on a tangent and get into that whole story. But anyway, the 6-day war was an absolute disaster for the Arab states. It resulted in hundreds of thousands more Palestinian refugees. It resulted in over 1 million Palestinians being placed under military occupation by Israel. Now, you've got the United Nations and just individual countries all around the world, the international community demanding that Israel return the lands that it had stolen during this war, because the world knew it was unjust. But of course, Israel doesn't care what the international community thinks. They just call everybody anti-Semites and they go on about their business. And the rest of the world, being the cucks that they are, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess if Israel doesn't want to do what we say, we should just, go let them do whatever. Who cares? But anyway, the Arab states didn't let go of this. That was 1967. Like I said, 8 years later, those Arab countries went to war, October 1973, to try and take back the lands that Israel had stolen from them in that 1967 war. Egypt, after the fact, they didn't win militarily. Egypt, Syria, they did not win militarily. For Egypt's part, they did, after the war, through negotiations, they got control of the Sinai Peninsula back. Syria ended up losing even more territory in the Golan Heights than they had lost in 1967. Now, I'm going to skip from because I said I was only going to be on 30 minutes and it's already been an hour. So I'm going to skip over 1973 to 2023. And I'm just going to summarize by saying throughout these 50 years, Israel hasn't budged. No matter how many hoops that the Palestinians have jumped through, no matter what they have done, Israel has continued over and over again to use any efforts by what Israel does is they'll go and they'll poke and prod. They'll kill Palestinians. If the Palestinians don't respond, they'll kill some more. If the Palestinians turn the other cheek, they'll kill some more. And eventually, you'll have some people who fight back. And they can't possibly go up against the Israeli military. So what they do is they go after what they can, which are civilians. I've never said that I agree with it, but that's what happens. That's exactly what Israel wants, though, because whenever the Palestinians fight back, that gives Israel this propaganda that they can use to tell the world, see, we're under attack. Just like the Holocaust, they're out to kill us all. They just want to destroy us. So we have to go and massacre their women and children. And they go out and they carry out these apocalyptic bombing campaigns against civilian populations. Huge operation against southern Lebanon in 2006. Huge operation in 2008 against Gaza, killed 1,400 civilians. 2014, they killed over 2,000 civilians, disproportionate numbers of children. So that's why I'm saying, here we are, October 2023. This fits perfectly into the pattern that Israel has engaged in since its founding. Most people don't know that just since 2022 to 2000, over this last year, prior to October 7th, the October 7th Hamas attack, Israel had killed hundreds of Palestinian civilians. It's the highest death toll in the last 2 decades outside of these major military operations. So it's reached a fever pitch. It's the Netanyahu regime, the most extreme, far right-wing, radical Zionist, fascist to the core administration that Israel has had since 1948. And they have been provoking like hell, because all along their plan has been to do what they're doing now, but they needed some justification, some pretext. So they've been killing Palestinians at a higher rate than they have in a long time. Israel has vastly increased its illegal settlement building, which, as much as the U.S. government is always backing Israel, even the U.S. government, it's our official foreign policy to say that these settlements are illegal and Israel should stop it. Haaretz and other Israeli news organizations have condemned this rapid expansion of settlement building, saying that it's going to provoke the Palestinians. You've had raids of Islamic holy sites by extremist Jews that go in and just go into Al-Aqsa Mosque and other places, desecrating it. These raids have increased exponentially. All of this dramatic provocation has resulted in what we saw on October 7th. You've got the Gaza-based faction Hamas. They retaliated. Al-Qassam brigades, their militant wing, retaliated in a very brutal way against Israeli citizens. If you've spent any time reading about how Hamas was able to, if you look through social media, if you look through, how did Hamas get away with this? You've got the Israeli Mossad, you've got Shin Bet, you've got the military up and down every inch of the border, not a real border, but the Israeli imposed border against Gaza. How is it that Hamas was able to get hundreds upon hundreds of fighters just pour right through? That there was virtually no defensive response from Israel. I mean, first of all, they screwed up and allowed it to happen somehow, but then stood down and didn't respond as hours and hours passed while the slaughter is happening. Jews and non-Jews alike believe that Benjamin Netanyahu knew that the attack was being planned, but he allowed it to happen so that he could carry out this new campaign of land grabbing and ethnic cleansing by using the Hamas attack as justification. But there is no justification for what Israel's doing. There is never justification for ethnic cleansing. There is never justification for genocide. There's never, ever, under any circumstances, justification for massacring children. Within its historical context, what Israel is doing now should not surprise anyone. This is what Israel has always done. It's just that the reason this time is so much worse is because they're going farther in their massacres in Gaza than they've done in the past. At least 8,000 dead Palestinians, overwhelmingly civilians. Among them, 3,000 are children. And if you don't believe that there's that many dead children, take a look at my Telegram channel. You'll see quite a few videos and photos confirming the mass slaughter of kids. So in the news today, I read that Israeli Führer, the Chancellor of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has rejected all of the international calls to implement a ceasefire. They're not done. In fact, they're doing just the opposite. Like Gerardo says in the chat there, they've gotten the green light from the United States. And so Israeli strikes on civilians have dramatically increased over the last couple of days. You've got these racist colonialist settlers who run around shouting, God gave us this land, and chopping down Palestinians' olive trees that have been in their families for generations, attacking them, killing them. The violence has gone up in the West Bank, which has nothing to do with Hamas. And all of this violence from the settlers, it's being done with the blessing of the Israeli government, often with the protection of Israeli forces. Israeli air attacks on the doorstep of Al-Quds Hospital in Gaza City in the last 24 hours I don't know if it totally destroyed the third floor, but it's damaged parts of the hospital. So you've got this increase in fear, you've got an increase in suffering, an increase in the inability of medical personnel to treat patients as needed. According to there's this group called the Committee to Protect Journalists. And they put out a statement saying that this month alone, 30 journalists have been killed trying to report on the violence going on. Almost all of them were Palestinian journalists. The United Nations Secretary General has used some pretty harsh language to describe what Israel is doing. Amnesty International has called Israel's actions clear war crimes that violate the Geneva Conventions. But meanwhile, you've got U.S. politicians competing to see who can stick their lips the furthest up Israel's fascist ass. You've even got Senator Bernie Sanders has abandoned all of his peace rhetoric, and he's gone full Zionist, much to the dismay of his fans. And of course, there in Biden's White House, not a single syllable of condemnation against Israel for its campaign of genocide and ethnic cleansing. Absolute cowards, the lot of them. Cowards. These are not real men. I mean, I know there are a lot of women in the U.S. Congress, but these men, I'm trying not to cuss, they're cowards. I'm furious. I mean, I've been angry for years about this, but the degree of cowardice being displayed by, I'm getting more involved. It's in me. I can't, usually I can sit here, do my networking, make my contacts, call my people, get information. There's activism that I can do online. There's a lot that I do with interviews. I've got several interviews lined up over the next 2 weeks. But I want to get out there. I want to get out there waving my flag. I want to get out there and scream. I am angry. I don't normally get this angry. I feel a great deal of indignation. I just cannot countenance violence against children. I mean, violence against any non-combatant civilians is horrible. But you don't harm children. Effing Satanists are what these Zionists are. So what can we do? I'm going to be putting out a couple videos this week with a handful of things that I think that we can do. Obviously, the easiest thing to do is to speak out frequently in social media. You know, as dumb as it may have appeared for everybody when at the outbreak of the Ukraine-Russia war to put little Ukrainian flags next to their names, it still had an impact. You may not like it, but it gave the appearance of massive support for Ukraine, right? Everybody out there, I haven't done it. I've got in most of my social media bios, I've got a Palestinian flag down there, but I don't have it next to my name. What it does on Twitter is anytime you modify your name at all, even if you're just putting an emoji in there, is it takes your little blue check mark away if you have one for a while until they re-verify or something. But I'm going to be putting the Palestinian flag emoji on everything. I'm going to be one of those people. I post a lot in social media. You guys can post a lot. And if you don't want to write this stuff, you can at the very least share what other people write. You can talk to people in a dispassionate, well, I don't want to say dispassionate in the sense that you come across like you don't care, but reasoned, rational conversation. And we tend to lose control in debates or discussions when we don't know what to say, when we don't have answers. Typically, that's when people start turning to insults or get angry because they don't want to lose the argument. But if you don't know how to make the argument, then people typically, no matter what the issue is, you default to insults and getting angry or trying to change the subject or straw man arguments or whatever. So one of the best things you can do is to learn. Go back and re-listen to this broadcast. Watch other ones. Learn the issues. It doesn't matter that they're Palestinians. If this was some other people, I would care about that too. And there are other terrible things happening in the world that I ought to address too, but I'm so consumed with this one. You don't have to be have some reason to be invested in Palestine. You don't have to be whatever, pro-Palestinian, pro-Muslim, pro-whatever. You don't have to be. They're people. This is about being human. This is about humanity. That's why there's so many Jews, especially in the United States, who are on the side of the Palestinians right now, maybe not in everything, but at least with calling for a ceasefire and admitting that what Israel's doing is genocide. You know, that doesn't mean that these American Jews are like, oh yeah, I'm big into Palestine. They may still disagree with the idea of Palestinian independence. I don't know, but on this they do care because they're people. Because what's being done is so horrifying, so shocking. There is no way that what Israel is doing today is not going to reverberate through the world in a way that hurts all of us. You cannot have so much wickedness and hate and it not affect others. You've got trouble elsewhere. You've got the Uyghurs in China living in their prison camps. You've got the genocide going on among the Armenians. There's a lot of badness in the world. Kashmir still is a problem. But this is the one that I'm currently focused on. There are a lot of rallies and protests and demonstrations that are coming up. Take a look online to see, type in something like Palestinian rally near me and show up. Show up and show support. Show your support. Strengthen numbers. The more people that show up, the better it looks. When you go on Twitter, and some on YouTube, but I especially see it on Twitter, and you see these little videos of, oh, well, here's this city in Europe, or here's this city in the Middle East, and there's just throngs of people out there. It's impressive. It tells you there are a lot of people who think like I do. There are a lot of people who see that this is bad. I'm not alone. I don't have to feel totally helpless. There are others, and make that happen in, participate in that. Make some signs, go wave them. So that's something. Is it going to make Israel stop bombing? No. But does it have an influence? It does. And what it does is it gives you conviction. Because when you act, when you go from just sitting and thinking about the issue and empathizing, when you take the next step, which is to get involved in some way, some substantive way, it has an effect on you, and you become more bold. You feel more ownership of this issue. You feel more invested in the issue. It has a good, strong psychological impact. So get active, get involved, demonstrate. I continue to recommend that you contact your members of Congress. It may not be effective, but it's something, and it only takes a couple of minutes to do it. Call your representatives repeatedly. Make a difference. One thing that I can do is, because of the platform, the base that I have, people want to interview me. So I'm going to be doing a number of interviews over the next couple of weeks to try and kind of cross-promote and spread and collaborate with others. And I will probably be doing some interviews of my own, of other people who are also kind of influencers in this area. But I always recommend that you try and be civil. This is the most uncivil I've been. Normally I can keep my cool, but every now and then I pop off and say something I shouldn't. It's important because at every opportunity that the adversaries can accuse you of being anti-Semitic, it works. Now, it may not work on people who are like-minded, but the label of being an anti-Semite will make others that you might be trying to reach, it'll make them question you and maybe doubt you or be slow to listen to you. So don't give them that rope to hang you with. Don't broad brush the Jews. One, it's strategically wrong. Two, it's not all the Jews. There's so many Jews who are opposed to this. One organization I'm in is Jewish Voice for Peace. Israel hates Jewish Voice for Peace. It's overwhelmingly Jewish peace activists who are just outraged at what Israel is doing. So I will never go along with the idea that we have to lump all the Jews together and talk about the problem are the Jews. That's not the problem. The problem are these Zionists. There is a philosophy that separates, and there's a lot of them. I'm not suggesting that this is some small number. There's a large number, a large majority of Israeli Jews are Zionists, and they've become increasingly extreme. So I'm not trying to pretend like that's, but I've been at this for decades. It is a losing tactic to go after the Jews or the Jewish religion or whatever. So I don't support it, and I would recommend that you be tactful in the way that you talk about it. Doesn't mean you can't speak strongly. I mean, you think that am I not speaking strong? Am I not saying things clear? Am I not expressing my absolute disdain for Israel sufficiently? But I'm not attacking the Jews, because that's the wrong target. And one thing that you guys got to learn to feed back when someone does call you anti-Semitic, you say, what are you talking about? I'm pro-Palestinian. How can I be anti-Semitic? Palestinians are Semites. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm anti-fascist. I'm anti-Zionist. I am anti-evil. I proudly stand with the Jews who are also against evil. I proudly stand with the Jews who are against baby killing. I proudly stand with the Jews who are against Israel's attempt to take all dignity away from the Palestinian people, ethnically cleanse them. So you can call me an anti-Semite all you want. You're the anti-Semite. You're the one supporting genocide of Semites. Palestinians are Semites. So kindly shove it, you anti-Semite. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my cool. Let me get another drink here. I'm going to get myself in trouble. And if you're talking to an evangelical, just remind them, these Zionists, these settlers, they go around. You can find the videos on Twitter, on YouTube, just anywhere. These Jewish settlers walking around spitting on Christians, spitting on priests, nuns, because they're Christian. Who do you think Jesus is going to stand with? This person because they're Jewish, who go around spitting on people and stealing their stuff and being all around vile, repugnant, hateful? Or the Palestinian over here who loves his neighbor and is trying to mind his own business, live in peace, have a decent life with his family, who reveres Jesus, whether they're Christian, and there are plenty of Palestinian Christians, but and remind them, Fatah, the West Bank, their government is secular. They've got Arab Christian politicians there. But even the Muslim Palestinians, or Muslims in general, they revere Jesus. They may not believe in him the same way Christians do as the Son of God, who has divinity, that God himself became incarnate. But they have immense reverence for Jesus, for his teachings. They revere him as a prophet. There's a big difference between what the Quran says about Jesus and what the Talmud says about Jesus. I don't want to get into like religious bashing or anything, but the Talmud does say that Jesus is the son of a whore, and that God hated him so much that he sent Jesus to hell, and that Jesus is in a vat of semen boiling for eternity as punishment. It's not really much of a comparison there in who Jesus probably is going to side with when it came down to this. Again, I don't believe in making it a religious debate, because I think that's half the problem, is trying to make this about religion. But if you've got someone who's like a Christian Zionist, and they're like, oh yeah, the Jews, chosen people, remind them, look it up in the Talmud. You can find it online. Compare what the Quran says about Jesus and the reverence that Muslims show to Jesus compared to what the Talmud says. Honestly, you're probably never going to bring a Christian Zionist around. Quite frankly, I just don't think they have the IQ that it takes to reason and rationalize and think through this. I don't think their brain processes that way. Some of them, maybe. But that's my experience. Not the sharpest tools in the shed. But because there is so much contention when it comes to religion, you're either pro-Christian, you're pro-Muslim, you're atheist, so you're against both of them. It always devolves into an argument, and that's why, except in very select cases where you're talking specifically about someone, whether that's their hang-up, is they want to look at it from strictly a religious aspect, then you can engage them on that. But in general, it's not the thing that I go to. I don't like discussing religion in the context of controversial issues like this. It doesn't go anywhere. It's not productive. Here's what you do when you talk to somebody. You listen to them. Find out what their hang-up is and agree with the points that you can agree on. If they say, oh, it's outrageous that Hamas killed women and children. Yes, it was. I agree with you. It was terrible. I wish that conditions were not so desperate and horrifying for the Palestinian people that it didn't lead some people to act in horrible ways like that. It is a shame that the people in Palestine live in such depraved conditions where Israel doesn't even let them have running water 24 hours a day. It's a shame that Israel controls the amount of food that Gazans are allowed to eat, that Israel does not allow because of the low calorie content. Israel doesn't allow the importation of chocolate into Gaza. Israel does not allow the importation of surfboards into Gaza. Why? Because Gazans might be able to float away. It's too bad that the Palestinians live in this open-air prison. Because if they were able to live with dignity, maybe you wouldn't have this terrorism happening. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought if you were living in a home where, for no apparent reason, the middle of the night, 3 to 4 a.m., bang, 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 bang on your door. The door gets kicked open, and you've got 6 heavily armed military men from a foreign military occupying power who come in, pointing their automatic weapons at you, shining lights in your eyes, waking you up. Your children are screaming in terror. They're telling you to shut your kids up and line your family up and present papers for every member of the family. And if you can't do that, they take your children away right then and there. Totally random. Have you ever thought what you would do in that situation? How you would feel afterward? Have you ever thought what it might be like to walk through an open air market trying to get food for yourself? And there has to be chicken wire over the top of the open air parts of the corridors because the settlers who have stolen the homes up above on either side take their used toilet paper and bottles of urine and throw it down on the shoppers, the Arab shoppers, as they are walking around trying to buy food for dinner. Rocks, glass. I've got pictures of it. In fact, I probably can't find a picture fast enough, but let me look real quick. Give me a second. Let me see if I've got one of these. And I'm not making this up. I saw it. I saw it myself. Hold on. Come on. I'm scrolling through looking at pictures. I've got so many pictures of carnage and mayhem and blood and gore. Hold on. Sorry. It's taking me a minute to scroll through. I'm trying to find... Dang it. Maybe I won't be able to find it in time. I was going to show you some pictures that I took. All right. I'll have to maybe post it on Twitter or something. I don't want to take up too much time here looking for it. But pictures I took walking through the marketplace. The Palestinians, the little shop owners, have got chicken wire up because as the school children are walking home, going through the corridors, the Zionists, the settlers, throw bottles of piss down on them, throw rocks at them. So they have to have the chicken wire there too. It doesn't stop the urine, but it stops the rocks and the bottles for the most part. Piles of trash that they just dump, that the settlers that have taken control of the homes on the hillside up above, they just drop their trash down on them. It's disgusting. It's inhumane. Yeah, I'm finding some pictures, but not the ones I was looking for. Oh, well. Here's one. This is just one going through an Israeli checkpoint. You have to... There's no free movement. As you walk around, if you're Palestinian, you don't have to do this if you're Jew, but if you're Palestinian, you have to walk through. It's like you're in prison just to go through the marketplace, and to get from point A to point B, you have to go through these turnstiles. You've got Israeli soldiers all around watching you, and you're stuck there, and they hold you up, pull people out of line to search and harass. It's just daily life for the Palestinians. It's unbelievable. That's what you should talk to people about. Say it's just inhumane. The people should not have to live like this. And if it was like even a few years, it'd be horrible. But lifetimes of this? No wonder the Palestinians have got these militants that go in and try and fight back. I think that legitimate targets should be the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli occupation forces, Israeli security forces, those that are part of or even the politicians, those that are playing a role. Or the settlers that are attacking them or stealing their lands. Defensive actions. I don't believe in going after Israeli citizens who have done, that. I mean, you make the argument that they're part of the problem because they're occupying the lands and so forth, but I do not believe that makes them legitimate targets. I think I don't think it's moral, and I think that it just strategically is a huge mistake. I don't think it works. I think you have to focus on the, going after the military, going after military targets, going after strategic targets. There's all kinds of acts of civil disobedience that you can engage in. Of course, anything that's a problem though. in a civilized country, look here in the United States. They went around, the Black Lives Matter and Antifa stuff, they went around setting whole neighborhoods on fire. Now, I'm not saying that I agree that the wimpy, non-existent response to that was the right one, but there's a big difference. If that had happened in Israel, they wouldn't just go in and go after the activists, the Antifa people or the Black Lives Matter people that were committing the crimes. They would go after the entire city and try and wipe out entire cities. If Israel was in charge, they would go massacre everybody in the community. That's what an uncivilized country does. That's what a terrorist state does. Israel is a terrorist state. Israel was born in terrorism. Israel has sustained itself using terrorism. And terrorism is exactly what the state of Israel is engaged in right now. And the world is watching it. And the countries that have the most ability to do something about it are going along with it. I understand the risk to Egypt, to Saudi Arabia, to Jordan, to Lebanon, to Syria, to Iran. I understand the risk that these states, to Turkey, I understand what will happen to them if they take a stand, if they get involved. Recep Erdogan, the president of Turkey, was just a couple of days ago threatening to send the military of Turkey down to Gaza to fight against Israel. I don't think he will. I think Erdogan's he talks tough, but he doesn't do a whole lot. I think he's done a heck of a lot more than some of the nations there in the region. But really, it comes down to Iran. And they're not even Arabs. Mostly Shiite Muslims. And the Palestinians are primarily Sunni Muslims. And yet Iran is willing to stand up for them. Anyway. All right. It's been an hour, 43 minutes. I need to wrap it up. I'll try and chop this live stream down into just some of the historical segments I talked about and repost that separately. But I invite you all to take action. Take action. This is my birthday. This is my 50th birthday. I could be in with my wife right now. I am here with you because this is what matters to me. My birthday. This is how I want to be known. Someone who couldn't do it all. But what I could do, I did. That's how I want my kids one day to look back at their dad. To know that I didn't know how to fix it all. But what I could do, I did not hesitate to do. And I ask that of you guys as well. I know you're maybe not as invested as I am because I've got a history with this, but still, to the degree that you can, do something. Do something. Even if it's just talking about it a little bit in social media, do something. You don't have to be an expert to just say, look, what's being done is a nightmare. And the only solution to this is to demand that Palestine that the occupation, the military occupation, which is illegal, that it be brought to an end and that Palestinians be allowed and supported by the international community in establishing a state where they can govern themselves and have dignity and set up an apparatus, a government system to help them and a military to protect them. And if I had my way, I would take Benjamin Netanyahu. I would haul his ass into the International Criminal Court and try him for war crimes. The ICC does not have the power to enforce any decisions that it makes, but it's the obligation, the expectation of the member states, the individual countries, for them to take action based on the verdict of the ICC. In this case, Netanyahu, he needs to go. I would not shed a tear if something happened to Benjamin Netanyahu. There have been a lot of killers in modern history, but I don't know of any as bloodthirsty, so full of bloodlust and racism and just pure evil as Benjamin Netanyahu. Anyway, that's it. Somebody had asked me on Twitter today, recommended to me that I set up one of these buy me a coffee pages or whatever it's called, accounts. He said it's better than PayPal, so I did it. I set up something. It's buymeacoffee.com/blackstoneintel. I don't get any money whatsoever from YouTube for advertising. I used to get paid pretty well from YouTube ads. I get nothing from YouTube. I was demonetized years ago. I can't even ask for super chats because I'm not allowed to do that. There's no way for me to make money. I get no income from any of this except for those of you who chip in. And several of you have, and I thank you for it. And I love you for it and appreciate you so deeply. But if you want to buy me a coffee for my birthday, trust me, I could use something a little stronger than coffee. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/blackstoneintel. You can make a donation if you do have PayPal, paypal.me/blackstoneintel. Can I post the link in my Telegram? I'll tell you one thing before I go. But the main one is patreon.com/blackstoneintel is a good way of supporting me as well. But I'll tell you one thing about Telegram real quick. I'm still trying to decide what I think about it. In fact, maybe I can show you a picture here. Give me a second. Oh, no, it's on my phone. I don't have it here. I can't show you the Telegram. Well, maybe I can show the Telegram channel. Did I already log out? Give me a second. Let me look. I think I've already logged out of Telegram, so I can't show you. Dang it. Yeah, I'm logged out. I noticed today there had been over the last 24 hours or so a bunch of people joined my Telegram channel. It's t.me/blackstoneintel. t.me/blackstoneintel. But anyway, I noticed there were a lot of people that had joined. All black. And all of them, their names is either Officer so-and-so or Captain so-and-so. All of them, one after the other, dozens and dozens of people. They're all these black Hebrew Israelites. The ones that you probably heard in the news that went to the rally, one of the Palestinian rallies, I think in Chicago, and got into fights with them. Very unsavory people. Yeah, it could be a troll farm, but dozens of them signed up pretty quick on my Telegram channel. I'm not quite sure what the agenda is here yet. People can't leave comments. You can. I used to have it set up where people could leave comments, but once I started back talking about the Zionist stuff, I don't, because they'll often hit my channels with. They'll have a bot farm, just boom, 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 just flood it with, spam. So I've turned off the commenting. You can't comment on my Telegram channel anymore, but you can click thumbs up, thumbs down, different things. And so I noticed suddenly, a change there. That's why I went to look at the membership to see what was happening. Flickoff says, I'm sure somebody just as bad as Bibi would take his place, unfortunately. I think that's true. I think that as bad as he is, there's some crazy people. That's the problem, is that Israel's government, their parliament called the Knesset, it is brimming with people who think just like Netanyahu. He brought in the worst of the worst. They are racist, openly racist. They don't even try to hide it. And bloodthirsty like you've never seen. They're always talking about needing to eradicate, like they openly talk about genocide. And they're cheered on for it. It's like a competition to see who can be the most extreme. It's sickening. So yeah, if once Netanyahu's out, he's probably going to go, probably get somebody just as bad. But the difference is, and the reason that I still want Netanyahu gone, is he has been at this. This is his third time as prime minister. He is a master politician. He has got so many members of the U.S. Congress in his pocket. Did you know that Jared Kushner's family, Donald Trump's son-in-law, who's married to Ivanka, Jared Kushner brags about how Netanyahu was such a close friend of the Kushner family that when he was growing up, Netanyahu would come stay with the Kushners in New Jersey and sleep in Jared Kushner's room on Jared Kushner's bed. Not with him, not in bed with him. Netanyahu is extremely well connected. And so while you could get somebody else in there after him who may be as bad of a Zionist as Netanyahu is, the next person would not have the kind of multiple decades worth of establishing deep connections, deeply, deeply entrenched connections with the most powerful people in the United States. Netanyahu does. That's why you got to get rid of him, or among the reasons you got to get rid of him. And there's going to be protests. Just a few months ago, there were 100,000 people out in the streets protesting, trying to get rid of Netanyahu. He's got momentary support because of this war, but it's not going to last. Not going to last long at all before they're back out in the streets screaming at him, trying to get rid of him again. Let's stoke that. Let's keep pushing that. Let's keep talking about that in social media. Get rid of Netanyahu. Anyway. Crazy freaking world. Bad stuff. But we can make a difference. Like I said, I am going to do a video this week with several. I've just talked in some very basic generalities. I'm going to give you some more specific actions that you can take, some tools you can use to get more involved and try and make a better, a bigger difference. And I'll share that with you this week. Sign up for Patreon. You can donate through PayPal. You can do the Buy Me a Coffee. I would like to, I know I keep asking for money, but I'm spending a lot of time on this and I'm getting no compensation, which it's pulling me away from other work that I was doing to pay the bills. So that's why I'm, got my hat in my hand. I got my Blackstone hat in my hand here, asking for $1 to chip in because I don't want to back off this. I want this to be, I want to put everything I can put into this. Yeah, I got a haircut. My mom says I look better. I got a haircut. Yeah. I lost a bunch of weight from exercise. exercise and extreme dieting. I'm talking like minimum 2 to 3 hours a day, doing about 10 to 15K distance a day. I'm too old for that, but that's what it took to drop some of the weight. What show am I going on? I don't want to say yet. There's a couple big ones. I'll put it out. I'm excited for a couple of them. Couple of them are small channels, but I'll talk to anybody. So if you're out there and you've got a channel, or you want to recommend me to a channel, go ahead. I'd be glad to talk about these issues. Those hats sold off really quickly the last time you made them. Yeah, I've got these hats that I wear these all the time. In my Blackstone caps. Blackstone ball caps. You can go, if you want a cap, you can go buy one at blackstonemerch.com. I don't ever talk about that site. I don't have a whole lot up right now. I've got some junky monster movie shirts like King Kong and some other stuff. Because among the businesses I have, one of them that I have is related to classic horror and sci-fi movies. What I've been doing, in addition to other things, is since it's guaranteed that I'm going to be knocked off of YouTube and this other social media, I'm so locked down. I'm also building, I enjoy video creation and this kind of stuff. So I picked something that I'm knowledgeable about, but that is totally safe. It's not the kind of thing that'll ever get me in trouble or demonetized or accused of being an anti-Semite or pro-Russian or anything. And that's a lot of these classic horror and sci-fi movies, old Universal stuff, Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Mummy, Creature from the Black Lagoon, old Vincent Price movies, Alfred Hitchcock, 50s sci-fi, the good old classics. Yeah, Jimmy Dore, he'd be fun to talk to. All right, so Just Observer, and a couple of you have mentioned Scott Ritter. I've actually got a book by Scott on my shelf. Where's it at? I've got a book by Scott Ritter, a pretty good book. I used to really like to listen to Scott Ritter speak back in what is that fuzz on my shirt? Back during the build up to the Iraq War. I mean, he did a good job out there speaking out against the march to war, having played such a crucial role in destroying the weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein had. So he knew it was propaganda. He knew it wasn't true that Iraq had a bunch of weapons of mass destruction. He knew that it was a lie, and he went around trying to do what he could. He even went and spoke to the Iraqi parliament. I mean, it was a ballsy move. And they went after him. And unfortunately, he if you know the story of Scott Ritter, you know the controversy. I have mixed feelings. I've also done a whole lot of work in the past on issues related to taking advantage of children. So given the past there, I'm kind of conflicted. I know that people would love for Scott and I to collaborate on some stuff. We both were doing a lot on Ukraine. He has, of course, a much bigger reach than I do. Much bigger reach. But, what he says on the issues is often very valuable insights. But they can always go back and say, but what about this? And those who know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. So would it be inconsistent with my values to get, uh, to overlook that and, to collaborate on other things? I don't know. What do you guys think? Just put it in the chat what you think. If you know what I'm talking about, because I've thought about it back and forth. I've thought about trying to connect with Scott, but I also know, the by association what will be said of me, and what'll, the arguments against me. So, oh, the other thing is I could not do it on YouTube for sure. YouTube has a rule, and it's a recent one, fairly recent, last year or two, couple years, where if YouTube has kicked someone off, if YouTube has deplatformed somebody, you, even if you've never done anything wrong, you cannot host that person or their content, or you will be given a strike. It's they erase the person. And so it couldn't be on YouTube. You'd have to be on, Rumble or wherever. So anyway, that's why I'm very conflicted. I think it's a very, very tragic circumstance. I think that had it been one time, you know, but a couple times, I can't really. He was set up. What it was he was. I'm dancing around the issue here because I don't want to seem like I'm bad mouthing him, because that's not. I've got great respect for Scott. Like I said, I've got a book, and I was a fan along, for years. But Scott was trying to hook up with what he thought was a teenage girl. Now, after the fact, he says, oh, he thought it was an adult woman pretending to be a teenage girl, but he was, 40 years old or something like that, and knew better. But some very graphic sexting went on with someone who was insisting she was a teenage girl. He went to meet her in person. They set up a meeting. And when he got there, it turned out the girl was an undercover cop. And he got busted. He was put on the sex offender registry. And I think it was not his first time. I think I believe there was another time. So did they set him up? Yes, absolutely. Did they entrap him? Yes, they did. Did he have very graphic sexual conversations with someone who was very possibly a teenage girl? Yes, he did. Did he go meet someone who was insisting she was a teenage girl? Yes, he did. So I think it's tragic. There could be more to it than that. I looked into it a lot because it really upset me. I was really disappointed in it. They took advantage of him. They found my opinion is they found a weakness and they exploited it, and they used it to shut him up because he was opposed to these wars. He was a very, very strong voice on the side that was against the war machine. So I don't disagree with the things that he says on geopolitics and things like that. Well, maybe I do sometimes. I don't follow him super close, but someone who's done that, I'm sorry, I've never been able to bring myself to. I think I'd be a hypocrite with all the things I've talked about how strongly I feel, about that kind of thing. I don't know if Scott and I were to talk privately, and it turned out that there was something more to the story that I'm not seeing. I could change my opinion on that, but that's where things stand. Everybody's got some issue, and the government agencies will go after you. They certainly come after me. They've come after me with what they thought they could get on me, from my experience working in financial crimes. They tried to take advantage of my experience working as a financial crime investigator to offer me considerable amount of money to connect them to financial criminals to help them try and defraud the U.S. government, which would have been, for me, a felony, and I would have gone to prison for it, or could have. And that turned out that was the FBI. Ingeborg Del Vecchio was their asset that they used, German national that they used to try and set me up and shut me down. So I'm not going to, they're dirty. They're dirty. So anyway, that's that. Jimmy Dore, he's a funny guy. So anyway, all right, guys, listen, I'm gonna wrap it up. I always enjoy talking with you. I enjoy reading your comments over there. I do appreciate you all, and I hope you have a good night and a great Halloween tomorrow. Maybe I can show you some wait a second. Maybe I've got some give me a second. Let me look. Let me see if I can show you. I might have a picture here. I'll show you some of my Halloween decorations I've got in my yard here. This is my Halloween display. Some of it. Let me see if I can add another one here. I think I can do this one. Some of you have seen the show on Netflix, Stranger Things. There is this girl, Max, and this scene where she floats up in the air. So I kind of recreated that. I've got her up there in my... I was never a big fan of the show, but the decoration I think looks cool. Her floating up there. Let's see, what else can I show you? I've got so one of my daughters got married just a few weeks ago, so I built a wedding arch for her. And then when the wedding was over, and we had, the drapes on it and flowers and stuff, but when it was over, like, well, what am I going to do with this arch? So I just added a few extra pieces and made a guillotine out of it. And then hung I made a Freddy Krueger dummy and a Michael Myers, and I made that pillory there for the decorations. Anyway, those are just a couple of the Halloween decorations. I grew up, since my birthday is the day before Halloween, my mom always, as a kid, always connected my birth. It was always a birthday / Halloween party. And she was kind of a Halloween nut. So I grew up really enjoying Halloween. But I also do it at Christmas time. My yard looks like this at Christmas too, but with Christmas stuff. I enjoy building stuff with my son and just having, fun, being an annoying neighbor with all my decorations, my Christmas trees and inflatable stuff and manger scenes and all that I build. I just think it's fun. Gives me something to do, way to de-stress. 12-foot tall animatronic ghoul, that would be really cool. In fact, my mom sent me a little bit of money, and for my birthday. And for me, a big thing is after Halloween sales, I go around to Spirit Halloween and Walmart and different places when they discount their stuff from Halloween to see what I can buy up to use for the next year's display. And we have, I mean, this draws my Halloween displays usually draw, you know, most years it's between 700 to 1,000 kids to the neighborhood, which is fun. Our street really likes to give out candy to the kids. I thought about putting my Palestinian flag out on the porch, but I decided not to do that. I'll wave it in other places, but since my kids live here, I know how Zionists are. I don't want people attacking my property. I've had that happen before because of stuff I've covered. I know I really don't want to put my children at risk. Anyway. Yes, Abdul says, before sleeping tonight, please make a small prayer for those in Gaza. Your prayers make a huge difference. I believe that as well. Even if you are not necessarily a believer in a supreme being, taking a moment to align your will and your hopes with those of others is a simple act of solidarity that I think makes a difference. And for believers, of course, there's the idea of, that collective faith has a power, that petitioning God for a blessing has, so whether you're a believer or non-believer, taking a moment to focus on positive outcomes for the Palestinian people is something worth doing. I did it tonight when they put the big 5 and the 0 instead of a cake. I had a key lime pie for as my birthday dinner. Lit the candles and sang happy birthday, and then I had my little girl sitting on my lap to help me blow out the candles, and I made my wish. And my birthday wish, was for a quick resolution, the quickest resolution possible to the massacre that's going on in Palestine. Focusing on positive energy, focusing our positive energy, I believe does work. And then acting on it to the extent that we can act on our well wishes, all the better. I wished very much that the Palestinians could replace the olive trees that the Zionists were cutting down, that the settlers were cutting down. But I wanted to do more than just wish. And that's why I started a couple years back that campaign to try and get olive trees. And it grew and grew. And with all of you involved, we raised $9,000 and helped them plant over 1,100 olive trees to replace ones that had been cut down by settlers. So when you take action and you collaborate with like-minded people, it leads to greater results than you could get on your own. Anyway, thank you all very much. Lisa Rua, thank you. And to my good friends who helped out as moderators tonight, Katie Cat Flickoff. Who else do we have? I know that Lawyer for the People is in here. And as always, whoever I'm forgetting, please forgive me. Thank you, guys. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, and I'll talk to you